Welcome to the Finer Girls podcast. I'm Anna Bogutska, and as ever, I'm your podcast host. In this mini-series, we're exploring and celebrating The House of Psychotic Women, the seminal book by Kayla Janice.
What do you think? Go ahead, be honest, just tell me. You think I'm insane?
Any of these women wrestling in the arena of mud?
No, I disgust you. I sicken you. You hate me.
But it's difficult, don't you understand? It is difficult. I didn't want it to happen, but it happened, and now...
The ripple effects of the book can be felt on a whole generation of film fans, filmmakers, and critics, with myself very much included. Kayla Janice's House of Psychotic Women is many things, as is its author. It's a book of film criticism, film history, a study of female neurosis, and a memoir. In this miniseries, I'm talking to special guests, all filmmakers whose films have featured a psychotic woman at the heart of them, about a film featured in the book that stayed with them the most. In the first episode, we dove deep into the themes and the writing of the book itself. Since then, I've been joined by Prana Bailey-Bond, the director of Censor, to talk about Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And today, I'm chatting to Deborah Haywood, director of Pincushion. I've invited my guests to pick a film featured in House of Psychotic Women and talk about what the film and Kayla's book mean to them. Deborah immediately picked The Brood, David Cronenberg's take on a divorce drama that sees a man trying to get to his raging ex-wife, played brilliantly by Samantha Eggar, who has been sequestered by a psychiatrist in his experimental clinic. Now, this doesn't even come close to describing what we actually get to see in the film. So if you haven't watched The Brood yet, please do seek it out and beware, this conversation is full of spoilers. If you enjoyed this episode, do let me know what you think. You can find me on Twitter at AnnaBDemented, and you can also support the podcast over on Patreon, where we're publishing more and more bonus episodes, or simply by leaving us a review over on Apple or Spotify podcasts. And with all of that said, please join me in the House of Psychotic Women. The lady says we're recording, so we must be recording. Deborah, thank you so much for giving up a little bit of your time to chat to me today. It's a genuine pleasure always to chat to you, and specifically about this book and the film that we're going to be talking about. So before we get into all of it, I wanted to ask you, since it's the first time you're on the show, what is your own relationship with horror?
Well, do you know what? Since I've been in the industry, I feel that the more I know that I don't know. But I know that I love it. And this morning I saw my old friend that I've been friends with since I was 4. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, shit myself, because I'm going on this podcast this afternoon about horror and I don't know anything about it. And she was like, you were brought up on horror. What are you talking about? You know, because it was like our, kind of like our pornography when we were little and, growing up. And I was like, yeah, but like, I literally, we only know surface horror. We don't know, like, there's horror people out there and they're like absolute fanatical and they know everything. It's like kind of like almost beyond nerdy. And so that's what gets me scared. But horror is probably, my favorite thing. And it is one of the things that I like to pay money and go and see in a cinema. And I love like the ones that make you scream, and I always scream.
Do you?
Always. And because now, like us being in the industry, sometimes we go to industry screenings, don't we? And I went to a critic screening of Censor, and I screamed like right out loud, and everyone was like turned around and looked at me as if to say, you know, like, you're not you shouldn't be a normal audience person. What are you screaming at? This is,
You're so right. I always felt that kind of pressure when I started going to critics and press screenings and industry screenings. I would be, very stoic. I'm like, no reaction. If it's a comedy, don't laugh. If it's a horror film, don't get scared. Just like, with my little notebook. And I still remember and think about a lot the screening that made me absolutely lose my shit was when I went to see Hereditary, and about 40 minutes in, I was like, I can't pretend. I was like, my knees were up to my chest. I was like, oh no.
Well, that's the best, isn't it? That's what that's what we go for, isn't it? For those like extreme reactions and emotions.
Yeah. And I was even I love watching horror films in the cinema, but I was watching a screener link of Barbarian at home by myself for work. And I literally screamed out loud by myself in my living room. Wow. And as I did, I was like, that's good. That's good. Yeah. That's a good film.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a good horror film when you're watching it at home and it's daytime and, it's daylight and you're still absolutely shitting yourself. That's just the best.
And what made you, what was your way of discovering Kira's book? Like, when did you first read it? How do you feel about it? Since you first picked it up, and now that there's, with the 10th anniversary, so much conversation about it and so many events happening around it.
Yeah, it was Lizzie Frankie that told me about it in the first place. And she always recommends horror books because she knows that, I like a bit of horror. And so she said, oh, there's this great book. And so I got it and read it. And I was like, oh, my God. Like on one hand, I was like, oh, my God, this is like completely like nothing that I've read before. It's like, complete autobiography. But then like talking about all these films and I was like, so what is it? Is it like a critic's book, or is it a memoir? Is it, like what actually is it? And I still don't know, but I know that I was really, really excited. And also it's kind of like, it got me excited because it was like, oh God, like, this woman is just so brave to get something like this out there, like all this trauma. And it does read like one book of trauma, because I suppose, she's picked traumas that also respond to trauma on screen. So of course it's going to be about trauma. I'm sure if she did another genre and she was talking about comedy films, then she'd like, write about the stuff when she's been pissing herself laughing, or whatever is in them films. So inevitably it's like that. But because of that, then it's it makes it such a powerful read, but also it kind of gives you permission yourself to be brave and think, like, fuck it, why shouldn't we talk about this stuff? We're always like, oh no, you should keep like your thoughts or your dark stuff to yourself. But she was like, well, no, actually get it out. And also it kind of makes sense that she has done it like that, because I know when you watch a film, you do put it back to your own life, don't you? It's like when I first saw The Brood, or the image of Brood, I saw the image first of the stomach and everything and the growths, and that's what made me want to track it down, because I remember walking down Walthamstow Market like about 20 years ago. I saw this old woman who was obviously, kind of, I think she'd got a bit dementia or something like that, but she was obviously very constipated, and she'd got like poo balls that had fallen into her tights, and she was walking and the poo balls were like, big balls and like kind of wobbling around in her tights. And it made me think about that. So of course, when Kayla's watching the film, she's going to be like, oh yeah, and that, that reminds me of this. And I was feeling that when that was going through. So it's kind of like really surprising, but also kind of it makes sense. And it's almost something inevitable about it. But I can't imagine that a man would have written it. Can you? I mean,
that's a really good point. And like, even though I've, this podcast and a Final Goals and everything kind of was born from this idea of, the intersections of horror and feminism and being a woman and all of that, I've kind of a little bit grown old, grown tired, I think, of this idea of, oh, there's something special, something really female about horror films. What I am interested in is exactly what you said, is the watching films, because you're watching them from your own unique experience, and that's shaped by you being a woman or being a non-binary person, being a man, whatever it is. But I think like when you're, to be very broad, when you're anything other than whatever the norm is, you're so aware that you're that.
Yes.
That then like watching these films you're kind of giving yourself permission to kind of feel a lot of like quite complicated, ugly things, because you're seeing a lot of really weird, complicated, ugly things on screen. It's like you're seeing them, and I think this is what Kayla's book kind of does so beautifully. It's like she's like, oh yeah, I remember this film, and also I remember exactly who I was when I was watching it, and how that's changed as she's revisited it and become, a critic, a programmer, an author, all of these things. Those films change. She's everything, but she also remembers who she was and how she watched the film. And when I was rereading it, I was thinking it would made me remember as well, being like, who was I when I watched, The Brood for the first time? Yeah. Like when I watched, A Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time, or The Exorcist. Like it makes you kind of go back, and you're thinking like, why?
Definitely.
Yeah, like who was I and why I was watching this and how I was watching it, like on a little TV in my room with friends, by myself. All those things just kind of make up your own, I don't know, your own mythology of sort of how you watch films and what you make of them, because it's totally different watching, Hereditary or whatever film you're watching in a press screening, or in a cinema with people who want to be there, or with your family, or with your boyfriend, or with your girlfriend, or, by yourself. Like it totally changes.
Oh, yeah. But also, don't you find that it changes regarding what's going on in society and what we've learned and how we've evolved as people? Because I remember seeing The Piano and thinking it's just an absolute beautiful love story, and so powerful and wonderful, and how strong this woman was, and then there was a couple of years ago there was some anniversary of it, and I went to see it again, and I found it quite rapey, and I was like, oh, this is a surprise, and I do feel that discomfort as well with horror. There's something about it. It's like in one way it's like I feel empowered by it, and by women, and they're all mostly center stage, and we're used to all the other genres are usually men are center stage. But then what they're going through, and that sometimes I'm like, oh, am I kind of adding to something nasty in the air here by watching it and enjoying it? So I do find it very confusing, but also that that's what's all compelling about it as well. It's like picking your own feelings apart after you've seen a film, and also like not knowing how to talk about stuff. I just said, oh, I can't imagine a man writing House of Psychotic Women, but then it reminded me of Tarnation, and that was by a bloke.
Yes.
So I think we're all wrong and right, but that is one of the things actually that I loved about Kayla's book, is that it's not judgy. It just says things how it is, and it's how she experienced stuff. But she doesn't judge the films or judge the experiences even. She just like says, this is how it is and this is how I felt, which I kind of really like, because then, you can't, you can't regret saying something. And then I think if that's what you've said, because it's your experience of it, and also you're not kind of putting your own thing on it, like I don't know,
You're also totally inviting other people to see it too. Because like if
yeah,
someone describes that film to me, I'm like, yeah, I want to see it. But if someone just tells me, oh, well, this is good or bad, I'm instantly like, well, I'm not interested because you're telling me nothing about the film.
yes,
I don't know who you are. I don't know what this film is or why it is good or bad. I will not trust why if you're just saying it's good or it's bad. I'm like, okay, well, fine, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah, because everything's good or bad to different people, isn't it?
Exactly. But don't think I forgot about the poo balls, which I'm now going to add into my vocabulary forever. I want to get into the Brood because when I messaged you and I invited you on, and with all the other guests, I also kind of offered them to pick any film that's covered in the book. And there's this really handy letterbox list of all the films, and you instantly went for the Brood. So I want to ask you kind of why this film? Why did you want to talk about it?
I think because it's the most striking image that I've probably ever seen in cinema. And, for her to, she's such like a beautiful woman, and she's got all this ugliness over her and gaping off her body, like deformity, almost like, the Elephant Man sort of big growths and stuff. And yet then she does this, she's got this, beautiful silk blonde gown on, and she lifts in her hands in the air, and, she turns into an angel. Well, what looks like an angel, and she doesn't turn into an angel, but, she makes the kind of gesture, or she looks like she's got angel wings, and it's just an extraordinary image. I think one that really, really speaks to you and gets you asking questions, kind of revolts you, but also intrigues you. And there's she's so beautiful, and yet she's covered in all this ugliness. I think I just defy anyone to see that image and not have questions or not want to watch the film and find out.
So you mentioned that you had seen the image before you watched the film. How did you first see that image? And then kind of also, what did you make of the film when you finally watched it?
I saw the image in some film magazine ages ago, but it was before you could really get films on the internet and stuff like that. So I lodged it, and I was like, need to watch that. I absolutely need to watch that. And then I watched it. It was on some, I think it was in like the Roxy in California, is like an old cinema where they show like old films for like £3 in the daytime kind of thing, and it's like a bit seedy and kind of just that old thing, where I don't know, there's like, I can't think of a comparison to, sort of a bit like that cinema that used to be on Rupert Street that you used to go downstairs to.
No, but I instantly thought of like, I mean, this is before my time, but maybe the Scala, like kind of a little bit of a cold, seedy place, and not that it's not seedy at all, but the Prince Charles Cinema, kind of whenever they show, kind of, I used to go there all the time as a student because they would show £1 films for £1.
Absolutely, yeah, that kind of thing, but not as grand. It's very tiny. So which felt really appropriate actually. But then when I watched it was like nothing what I thought it was going to be about. I got I thought it was going to be some kind of like alien film or something like that, but it wasn't. It turned out to be much more like, I mean, how do you describe it?
Well, I was about to ask you, how do you describe The Brood, and how do you even describe Nola?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They just defy explanations. But I went and watched it again the other day when I knew that I was going to talk to you, and I'd already seen your email saying, this is supposed to be like Cronenberg's Kramer versus Kramer,
Mhm.
and I completely read it in a different way, the film.
Tell me.
Yeah, so before, when I watched it
Mhm.
before, I thought it was kind of like the mad woman in the attic, and the woman, it either had too many children or she wanted all these were like miscarriages or abortions or whatever, that were kind of haunting her and made her go crazy. And so she was in this like mad woman in the attic, and that was the problem. And all of these, you know, entities that were going attacking everyone, I thought that they were kind of ghosts of her children that weren't born, sort of thing. But then when I watched it yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, this is like, he's clearly the central character. Well, I mean, clearly, but this is what I thought with the Kramer versus Kramer thing. He's the central character. His woman's like in therapy or something, and the therapist is, you know, like as sometimes like in marriage, you know, you use the therapist against you, or you feel. Or they say, oh God, you know, like we were completely happily married until she started having therapy and then realized that, you know, she didn't want the marriage or anything anymore. So I thought it was that kind of thing, but I don't know where I'm going now. What was I saying?
You were talking about the rewatching it yesterday.
Yeah. So then I thought, oh my God, so she's in therapy because of, but then I was like, oh, because then when I saw him flirting with the teacher, and you know, she must be in therapy because he's going off having, you know, like maybe little thingies. But then he sees himself as this hero. I mean, he was so flawed that unflawed. He didn't do anything wrong. He was, you know, this beautiful man who, you know, all he wanted to do was get his child back and help, you know, and then, you know, this teacher takes advantage of him. But then the wife, you know, she's you know, killed that one off, sort of thing.
I mean, I'm very into the other film that you thought The Brood was before watching it, of kind of her miscarriages haunting her, or kind of, you know, them being this is a completely different film that I would also like to watch.
I was going to say, I think we should write it.
Absolutely. And there is something, it is weird because the whole Kramer versus Kramer thing that I sent you in an email, you know, about this, reading this as sort of his divorce drama, you know, about because it was partly inspired by his own custody battle with his ex-wife. And you remember when I first spoke about this film on the podcast, kind of that was a big part of the conversation, right? It's like, oh, it's Nola is presented as such a monster in a way that, you know, she's the demonized ex-wife.
Yeah. She kind of looks like Medusa, doesn't she?
Yeah. But I also, like, when I first watched that film, I never thought of it that way. Like, I remember thinking of, like, when we finally get to her, I was like, she's, you know, sort of built up in this way, but then when she reveals herself, I'm like, wow, she's more powerful than both of these men, you know, the therapist, cult leader figure, her ex-husband. I'm like, you're kind of on a different plane. And I think if I were to, you know, imagine a sequel to The Brood, I was thinking like, oh, she's now starting her own cult, because look at this, her rage and all her stuff is manifesting physically in this way that is so powerful and so angry and physical. I'm like, I think she's above all of these other dudes, because like, as much as when I see her, I'm kind of looking at it from her point of view. So like, this is a hell of a lot of processing and therapy and like sort of rebuilt physically, remaking herself in a way. And then like, I never really think about it as, you know, this is her being, you know, a monster. It's her becoming a monster, but as monster is never necessarily bad in my book.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could remake it from her point of view?
Yeah, absolutely.
And see really, you know, like what is going on in her head, because it's all from his point of view. Which, if it is about marriage, kind of like obscure, excludes you from her side of the story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We only get his stuff. That's why, was it the Marriage Story with that tall bloke?
Adam Driver, yeah.
Yeah, him. Like, when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, but I want her story.
Yeah.
And yeah, with this one, it'd be like great to have her story and, you know, like what she really thinks is going on. And you know, why does she have to go to a cult in the first place? Is it because of her husband and patriarchy? And because we don't see films with, you know, if she's psychotic, we don't really see that many films with the male, you know, the husband being psychotic or neurotic or whatever it is. But I do think that, you know, like it is common for a man to say, you know, a man to feel disempowered by female because she's the one who's given birth, so she kind of gets the rights more. And I think that, you know, like women then do get built up in people's minds. It's like, yeah, she's got all the power, and yet it's her is like, you know, throwing shit at everyone, and you know, these like, you know, little rage balls or whatever they are, balls that you know, they are, this time I read them as like flying monkeys, you know, like when there's like you've got a narcissist and a narcissist, like, you know, infects everyone else, and you know, then somebody else goes and repeats stuff, and like the poison gets spread around. I saw that like that this time.
And what do you think of her, you know, in the context of Kayla's book and everything? What do you think of her, of Nola, as a psychotic woman? Is she even psychotic?
Well, she seemed really not psychotic to me, but you know, I mean, what is psychotic? Do we actually see psychotic women that are not in film?
Well, we get, it's a very big trope. We get them a lot in books, and like in horror films, I think. Well, in films in general, I think the psychotic woman, which is everything that, you know, Kayla explores in the book, is just so malleable. Like, it changes.
Yes.
And even if because Nola never really raises her voice, does she?
No, that's what I mean. She's very gentle and, but then, you know.
But everything is sort of manifesting through her body. And even in the big image and the last scene, with her, you know, flying monkeys or little rage monsters that how they're described in the book, which instantly made me think of Lady Gaga and her little monsters as well.
Yes.
Like there's something also really scary about, you know, a psychotic woman who is never really losing her temper. Which I found really interesting about her, because she's very calm, very soft-spoken. Yeah. Even when she's saying, like in her last scene, is like all this horrifying shit, but she never really, you know, goes full psycho.
No, she doesn't, does she?
Yeah. And I was wondering what you thought about kind of that performance by Samantha Eggar, because that is like specific choices that go kind of against our vision of a psychotic woman.
Yeah, no, I think it was very clever, because she's harder to blame if she doesn't, you know, act mad and is screaming and all the rest of it. I think it makes her more powerful and more frightening, because she's more unreadable. Yeah, I wonder what. Because there's that book, isn't there? It's like The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder what, if we read that. I've never read it. I've always meant to read it. But it'd be interesting to read that and to see, you know, like, because I think that's all about trauma manifesting itself physically.
And do you think there's something extra scary by the fact that her anger and her distress is manifesting as, like, you know, external wounds? Absolutely,
yeah, don't you?
I mean, yeah, but I mean, I find the whole, I mean, I'm not a mother, so like the whole idea of pregnancy and childbirth is fucking terrifying to me.
Yeah, well, so it should be. You're right to be scared.
What do you think is kind of so what do you think is so scary about it that the film really, really reminds us of by putting it literally outside of her?
And without belly buttons. I
Oh
mean,
my
what does that? I mean, there's something horrifying about that, isn't there? It's kind of like a detachment, or I don't know. I mean, I found that the scariest bit.
Really?
You know, these things. And
Mm.
also, did they remind you of the like little girl or creature thing in Don't Look Now?
Yes, totally.
Which came first?
I think it was Don't Look Now. I want to say it was Don't Look Now. I might be wrong. But there is something creepy about children in general, but also children who are acting like adults.
Yeah.
Like even if you think about something like Esther or Children of the Corn,
Oh,
Village of the Damned, like any child who's kind of like behaving like a tiny adult, instantly creepy.
But they've got adult hands, haven't they? Really scary. And cleft lips. I love a cleft lip.
Really?
Oh yeah, I think there's something like just like, oh my god, love a cleft. And if it's on an albino, oh my god, I'm just there for that. There's just something.
So what do you make, like what do you make of them as these tiny rage monsters?
I don't know. I thought it was they're acting up. Like when there's children who are going through a divorce and then they start acting, misbehaving and playing up at school or being violent, or the teacher says, oh well, they're like suddenly misbehaving. I thought it was that, and that the trauma was coming out in children, and it's children who take on the rage, especially with her, like at the end when she's growing her own blisters. It's like, oh yeah, so now she's traumatized now because of this that's been going on with the adults, and they're gonna grow on her, and she's gonna take them into and maybe have maybe she'll be having navel-less babies. Or I loved it also when she like pulled one of them out of the sack and then pulled it out. And then like it was like a hamster. Is it hamsters or kittens that like eat back and clean the baby up? And that was amazing. It's just so like it gets to your belly, doesn't it? It's like
it's like it's that thing of the thing that really strikes me about it, and as terrifying as I find the idea of childbirth, it is also like the thing that I wonder if we find it terrifying because we're just never really allowed to see the actual thing. I'm not talking about kind of scenes of childbirth. I'm talking about like we just sanitize it so much.
Yes.
That when something like this comes along, that is even sort of, like you said, like kittens or animals, when they give birth, like automatically kind of there's stuff that happens or like stuff looks a certain way or whatnot. And like when you sort of see it in a film with a human, and this is body horror and all that jazz, but it is so like it really hits you in the gut because you kind of know that it is rooted in something very everyday. Like people give birth every day, and there's weird complications with birth every day, and newborn babies are gross. Like, the whole process is gross.
You never see the placenta, do you? Like even though I've got a daughter, but I had an emergency cesarean. It wasn't until like my friend, like a few years after, she was a big smoker, and she said, oh, after I gave birth, the midwife brought my placenta over. She said, and it was like black and all in bits, and it's supposed to be pink and all intact. And I was like, what are you talking about? What placenta? Because you only ever see like an umbilical cord, and it's cut in that. They don't tell you that you kind of like have another labor after your baby, and you give birth to this placenta.
I mean, yeah, and there's this whole, I'm very much into TikTok, and there's this creator who I follow who has basically been making, there's a lot of kind of, expecting or young or mothers online who are kind of talking about and showing the kind of the realities that they experience.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And there's this young woman who's been keeping a list of all the reasons why she never wants to get pregnant. And one of them that I just remember being like, this is not real. What is this? Apparently, like some people will get kind of these weird, giant, bulbous, like growths on their armpits when they're pregnant.
Really?
And I was instantly like, what the fuck is this? Is this David Cronenberg making pregnancy? Like,
God.
what is happening? And I instantly thought of The Brood. I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
Oh.
what are all these things that could happen to bodies that we just
Do they
don't?
twist them? Because I watch TikTok spots and blackheads and all those kind of things. People having toenails cut out.
I did not watch further on because I was like, I cannot watch this. It was the size of a fist on this woman's armpit.
Nice.
And I'm like, this is just not, why does no one tell anyone about this?
Wow, I wonder what trauma that was then.
And I think you're actually right. I read the ending the same way of like the child kind of inheriting this thing, which makes sense, right? It's trauma begets trauma, and kind of the way, I think especially the way of dealing with things is the thing that we learned from our parents, right?
Yes.
Like the way that you see your mom or dad or anyone who is in your immediate family reacting to stuff.
So she turned into a mom.
Yeah, because like if she see, like if you kind of learn by mimicking, right? That's how we first learn. And if what you're seeing is someone being so angry that they're creating little killing creatures, then like that's the thing you're gonna mimic, right? It's the same way as if you see your parents being, I don't know, really, really angry or violent or stuff. It's not unreasonable to see then kids kind of react to situations in a way that they see their parents deal with those situations. Like if...
Yeah. No, I never thought of it that way. But also when you were saying, oh, her mum's so angry that she's developed these things, it's like, why did she have to develop them? What, could she not voice them in her marriage?
No, clearly not.
They're suppressed and they come out in, other ways, because I think it does, doesn't it?
But one of the things I really love about this film is, well, about a lot of the films that are featured in the book, is that a lot of them are about like women who don't speak because if they speak, they're not really believed. So it's either like they just internalize it, or it becomes something like this, something monstrous, or they have to find a way to like speak whatever it is, like to actually talk about it. Or, they mention it at the start and then nobody believes them, and nobody, so essentially they're kind of shut down over and over again. And I do love that this, subgenre, because it's not that they're often psychotic, it's that they're kind of silenced in a way. Like either by themselves or by other people. And then you get the little rage monsters, because of course you would.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think is behind everything? And I don't know. I mean, I think that you know everything. So
I know nothing except TikToks and horror films.
So these films are often like there's a man in them, isn't there? And a woman. But if men didn't exist, would women be psychotic?
Damn.
Or is it women psychotic, or is that because of hormones and patriarchy? Like, I don't know. I think there's like in all of these questions, in all of these films Kayla's picked, there seems to be, you know, that lack of control, but also trying to gain control or gain purchase or you know, kind of, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this one, but
I wonder, because we'll never know what it would be like to, you know, for culture to not be a patriarchy or stemming from that. And I don't even think it's so much about like men. I think it's about the patriarchy. And I think men are
a victim of that as well, aren't they?
Exactly. Totally. I do think there is something about sort of seeing it and then trying to unlearn it in the same way as, like, you know, if there was a sequel to The Brood about the child of this, you know, terrible marriage. It's like the good ending, the happy ending would be the child kind of unlearning the way that their mother dealt with everything.
Yeah.
And also the way that their father dealt with everything. And kind of figuring out a better way. But if it was but that would be a very boring film. But if it was a horror film, it would essentially be about, like, no, the way that you've learned to cope with shit is because you've learned it through two very fractured people. And then the whole story of your life in a horror film is kind of trying to unlearn the thing that made you the way you are, that comes from your parents, that then, you know, is hurting other people. But it doesn't, I don't think Nola or anyone in the film is a bad person.
Oh no. And trauma is kind of usually circumstantial, not somebody evil, or I'm not even sure of. But also, I think that trauma is kind of necessary.
What do you mean?
Well, I just think, obviously I can't tell, but if I think, and this is my interpretation, and you know, obviously it's clouded, we're all clouded by whatever we see, and you know, but I think if Kayla hadn't have gone through her experiences, she wouldn't have had the drive and the anger and the need to prove herself, and to, you know, have that relentless need to explore and create, and voracious appetite for film, and to be able to talk about it, and that bravery. So I think that, you know, like, as sad that I am that she went through those experiences, I'm kind of glad that she did as well, because we get all her stuff. Just before I made my first short film, Lady Margaret, my dad died. And it kind of gave me an energy, like, fuck it, doesn't matter if it's, you know, shit or whatever, I'm going to make it, because the worst thing's already happened. And then when I was making Pincushion, it's like 3 days after I got the green light from the BFI, and they said, yeah, we're giving you production money to make it. My husband said, I don't want this anymore, and kind of, you know, chucked me off a cliff. So I was like reeling with like all this, like, what the actual fuck? My whole life, you know, I've been abandoned. My whole life's like in, you know, what do I do? What? And you know, coping with all this like shit and everything. And it kind of gave, on the positive side, it gave me an energy, and it was just like, do you know what? I'm just going to absolutely run at that screen and splat myself all over it. As a way of, you know, kind of like trying to express or understand or, you know, work through some of those feelings. So I do think that, you know, okay, that little girl has got those blisters on her arm and stuff, but it's going to probably, you know, she's going to probably have some unique achievements and experiences because of them. Whereas if there's nothing wrong, it's just like, whatever, I'll just, you know, lay on a beach and pick my nose kind of thing. Whereas if, like, you know, like you've got blisters, it's like, fucking, you know, like, what do I do? I don't know. It kind of gives you an energy.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who is mostly motivated by spite, I can highly relate. Like, I find spite is a great motivator. And is there kind of watching the film now? I mean, this is a 70s film. It's very much a 70s film.
Yeah.
But like, did you watching it now in 2022, did it resonate in a particular way?
Yeah, because I think it did. I mean, like there were things like, oh my God, they should have hid the children's faces because they clearly got like little masks on, or so that was not so sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
But I think emotionally, we never change, do we? We've still always got those. Our feelings never change. But yeah, I didn't notice that Oliver Reed had a particularly like interesting face shape.
What do you mean?
Looking at him thinking, God, he looks like almost like a caricature. He doesn't look real. He's so striking and extraordinary looking.
He is.
Yeah. And also, do you know what? I absolutely loved those sets. Oh yeah. God, that wallpaper in the kitchen.
I don't think enough credit is given to Mr. David Cronenberg for his production design, for his sets.
Absolutely.
Because when I did the Brood on the Female Monster series like a few years ago on this podcast, my guest also mentioned the wallpaper. So
oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think it's relevant today?
Well, I think in the last couple of years, not just horror, not just about film, I think we've sort of, created a whole new language to talk about being a woman in the world. And I think part of that has like that it's trying to express that thing that the other thing that the film represents. So instead of just keeping it all in and letting it literally transform you and make you into the worst version of yourself, the monstrous version of yourself, and making you hurt others, I think there's now the permission that you mentioned at the very start of our chat. You're kind of, I think we all have given ourselves permission to speak the way we want to speak and about what we want to speak, write about what we want to write, watch what we want to watch, engage with it in however way we want. And I think the film resonates for me today largely because Nola was not giving herself and was not allowed permission to do that. Given through therapy, this thing that she's going through, it's the way that she is, trying to say things that are difficult or to work through some stuff, and it sort of made her into this mother of monsters in a way.
And read it different if Oliver Reed had been a woman.
That's an interesting reimagining remake of this, especially now, especially with how we talk and think about things now.
Yes.
And also, I do agree with you. Oliver Reed is very striking.
Yeah.
And he just has one of those voices as well, and faces where he's like, oh wow, this is what a person who is designed to be in movies looks and sounds like.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure it was odd in person, but I'm like, wow, I just want to see you on the screen.
Oh my God, and all that daddy stuff. The role play.
I don't know. I think that's aged very differently.
Oh, yes.
And
I mean, I felt really fucked up when I was experiencing that.
How so?
I don't know. It was just like so. And it started I thought they were in a play because they were doing that, like role play to each other. I don't know. It just really gave me some kind of pervy vibes. I don't know whether that was intentional or what, but that's another whole rabbit hole that you can go down, isn't it? All the role play and
oh, totally.
Yeah. I mean, the film's got so much. It's like a pick and mix almost of different things that you can interpret or take away or whatever.
A pick and mix of traumas.
Yes.
And Debbie, before I let you go, is there anything that we haven't touched on about the film or about the book that you wanted to bring up?
You know what? I kept thinking about, we need to talk about that. Yeah, I can't remember any of it. I'm so excited to see you.
Me too. Deborah, thank you again so very much.
And also, can I just say that I love watching you evolve and grow, and I'm just excited for your future because I think you're a very special person, and I'm so glad that you're into everything that you're into.
Thank you so much.
That's okay.
I feel foolish kind of asking where people can find your work, but where can people find you online, and especially where can they watch Pincushion?
They can watch Pincushion, I think Amazon Prime, BFI. I'm not really sure where it is at the minute. I've disappeared off Facebook, but I'm still on Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, that's
wonderful. It. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for not just your kind words, but also for giving me the word poo balls. I will treasure that forever.
Yours.